All right, welcome back to Burt's Basics, Box Elder High School. This is Medical Anatomy and Physiology, and today we are tackling the skin. So we're going to work on standards 4 through 6, which are structures of the integumentary layers of the skin and the glands found in the skin. So let's go ahead and get started. These are a list of the things that you need to know. So it says here, look at the skin, glands, hair, and nails, and then take apart the skin into its 3 layers and know a little bit about each layer. And then there are 2 major glands found in the skin that we want to make sure we compare and contrast. Now the problem is they both look very similar. They both start with the letter S, and they both are gigantic words. So we are going to do our best. They are called sudoriferous and sebaceous. And so these words are kind of tricky. So we'll do the best we can. So when we look at skin, the best way to start on skin is know some terminology. So integument, a lot of times in every book we're going to call it the integumentary system. Now you might not be familiar with that word, but integument is just another word for a covering. And my skin does a dang good job of covering me, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. So if we look at our integumentary, this is my integumentary system. It's made up of 3 layers. We have our top layer called the epidermis. We have our middle layer called the dermis, and we have our bottom layer called the hypodermis, okay, or subcutaneous. It goes by 2 words. So in order to really understand this and not just memorize hollow words, look at these med-term definitions on the side, which I'm hoping you already know. Epi we're going to use all the time. So epi means on top, or on top of, or above. So if we have epi as on top, we have sub, which means below, or hypo, which means below, and derm means skin. So a dermatologist is someone who studies skin. So it makes sense that if derm is my main layer of the skin, what are we going to call the layer on top? Well, let's call it the epidermis. What are we going to call the layer on the bottom? Now you can call it the subdermis, because I think everyone will know what you're talking about. But in this class we're going to try to use these words. We're going to try to use hypodermis, which is the skin below the dermis layer, or the subcutaneous, subcuticle, underneath the skin as well. Now a lot of people argue about this 3rd layer. They don't know if they argue, some say it will be skin, some say it is not skin, it's just an addition underneath the skin. I'm just going to teach you 2, and then we'll just kind of talk about it a little more in depth in class. So let's start with our top layer called the epidermis. Now, if you guys remember when we did our tissues, there was 4 categories of tissues. There's epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. And in the epithelial, there was 3 shapes. There was pancake, squamous, there was the block, which are the cuboidal, and then there's the long, tall, skinny ones, which are called the columnars. Those are part of your epidermis. Your epidermis all builds on something called a basement membrane. Now the basement membrane is where everything comes into play. That's where the epidermis and dermis get separated. So if you want to look at the basement membrane as the, the floor, I guess. Above that floor is the epidermis. Below that is the dermis. That's my dividing line. Now if I show you these, I'm just showing you these to help me later. You need to know that it is stratified. Holy freaky stratified. Now stratified means more than 1 layer. You want your epidermis to be strong. You want it to be protective, okay? The problem with my epidermis is it is also over here, this word over here, avascular. Now, A means without, and vas means blood, so avascular means there's no blood vessels in my epidermis. So if I take my fingernails, if you look at my camera, and I scrape my arm, okay, I can see streaks in it, but I'm not bleeding. That means I'm still in the epidermis. If you ever get hurt and blood starts coming out, that means you know you've penetrated the basement membrane. Because down here in the dermis, there is blood. So my epidermis is avascular, okay? It's stratified, but it's not very thick, and it has 2 types of cells in it. Now, in class, we're going to go a lot more in depth on these cells. In these YouTube videos, I'm just trying to give you the basics. The melanocytes are cells that are used to help protect the epidermis from UV light and damage that way. This is what is in charge of the tan, so you've probably heard of melanin before. And the other one is called keratinocytes, which you've also probably heard. These are cells that produce a protein called keratin, and we use that keratin in lots of cool things. Now, the reason why I'm showing you these 5 layers, you do not need to memorize these layers, so don't panic about stratum basale or spinosum. But what I'm going to do is when we get to cancers, I'm going to talk about a cancer called basal cell carcinoma. And this is where it is. It's right here in the 5th layer of the basal cells in the skin. So that is where that cancer is found. So there's always a rhyme or reason to this class. It just depends on how much we want to know and how much we want to study. But this is my epidermis, okay? Now, if we look at these sites, melanocytes and keratinocytes especially, some of the things you need to know is about fingernails. And yes, I know that is the nastiest picture ever. I'm sorry. I'll just cover my eye and I won't see it, okay? And hair. So these are our two parts of accessories to the integumentary system, and the only thing I'm going to do in this video is know that they are made out of dead cells. Look at your hair. That's a close-up of a hair. It is made out of these dead cells, laced with keratin, which is a protein. Fingernails are awesome. They help us pick up stuff. They help protect the ends of our fingers. They're made up of dead keratinized cells, and they're awesome. But these are all just extensions of these two cells called keratinocytes and melanocytes. Okay, so now we got epidermis down pretty good. Let's go to the harder one. The next one is, I don't even know where to put my face, there's so much information here, is your dermis. Just a helpful hint from an anatomy teacher. If you're getting questions asked about skin, roll with dermis. Okay, dermis has a ton of stuff. So if we look, here's my epidermis. This is my basement membrane, so anything above this is my epidermis. Look how much stuff is in my dermis layer. I have blood, I have nerves, I have hair going through there, I have all these glands, I have a muscle. Look at that, that big red thing, that's a muscle. That's why in almost every textbook, they should call dermis or skin an organ. It is a collection of tissues, lots of different kinds of tissues. So since it has blood, we're going to call it vascular. And it has muscles too. Now these muscles are kind of cool because their names are erector pili. A great test question is this a cardiac muscle, a smooth muscle, or a skeletal muscle? And you should be able to knock that out without a problem because one, there's no bones here, so it's definitely not skeletal. And two, there's cardiac. Your heart's not here in your skin. So this has got to be a smooth. And you know that because every time you get scared and those hairs, whoop, stand up, it's doing it on its own. These are involuntarily controlled. So then we have our hair, and we also have these glands. Now there are two major glands, and we're going to divide them into just subgroups. There's this gland right here that tends to be next to a hair follicle, and there's this gland that tends to be on its own. Now you can see they're both going to secrete products out onto the epidermis. This guy has his own tube right here. This guy is going to share the shaft with the hair. So let's talk about these two glands, because this is a perfect time to introduce them. Okay, the two glands in the skin are called sebaceous and sudoriferous. Now, sebaceous glands, like I said in this class, in a primary anatomy class, tend to always share the hair follicle. So you can see these guys are going to lubricate the hair with this white substance that's mostly made out of lipids and fats and some salts, stuff like that. And it's an oily residue. So that is called a sebaceous gland. A sebaceous gland secretes oil. This helps lubricate the skin, make it pliable. It even actually helps things not grow on it, like kills bacteria. Now, sudoriferous glands are different. Sudoriferous glands secrete water, salts, ammonias, proteins. There's lots of things in there, but you commonly call it sweat. So sudoriferous glands are your sweat glands, and sebaceous glands are your oil glands. Now let's figure out how you're going to memorize them to tell them apart on the test. Remember, sebaceous glands tend to always share with a hair follicle. Sudoriferous tend to have their own duct most of the time, so they do it on their own. Another way to remember sebaceous glands is, watch out, I'm warning you, when we talk about acne, acne is a clogged sebaceous gland. So do you see this beautiful white substance right here? That is a substance called sebum. And sebum is the oil that is produced by the sebaceous glands. So next time if you pop a zit and then some white stuff hits the mirror, you can like get your finger, wipe it up and be like, hey, that's sebum. Okay, that came from your sebaceous gland. Where sudoriferous gland tends to secrete water and all that stuff. So on my test, I'm just warning you. I'm going to try to trick you and say true or false. A clogged sudoriferous gland is acne. And that is wrong. It's not a clogged sudoriferous. It's a clogged sebaceous gland. Okay, the last layer of skin. The last layer of skin is called the hypodermis or subcutaneous. And if you look down here, it's bright yellow. In almost every picture that we've used so far, it is yellow. Because the major ingredient of the third layer is fat or adipose tissue, lipids. It is an insulator for us. Now, humans, we tend to store our fat as a solid, not like a liquid like plants do. So in this case, it is a great protector for us. It insulates, it helps us. Some people argue it's not skin. That's why they call it the hypodermis, below the skin. In most books, they just call it an extension. Now, the last layer, the subcutaneous, helps anchor my skin onto everything underneath, which will generally be muscles or organs. But we need it. We have to have it. Our body core temperature is 98, 99 degrees. I mean, we are very high body temperature. So we need some insulation. It helps us, you know, during the winter time. It does a lot of things. A good energy storage. It's even a protector, right? So I have a lot of protection on my hypodermis in my body. Okay, so that is your breakdown of skin. Hopefully you learned something here. So now let's take your quiz. So do me a favor. The answer key's coming right up, so knock out this quiz, label A, B, C, and D. Do your best on B. Didn't really talk about B too much. And then knock out 1, 2, 3, 4. And just pause it here, answer it up. The answer key's coming next, and thanks for watching Burt's Body Basics, and I hope you had a good time. See you later.